All right, good morning, Christview. I first want to start off with telling you how proud I am of you. So let me give you a little quick history here before we get into the sermon today and the message of the day. Is 12 years ago when I got here, when we had a blizzard like this, we either canceled church or there's like 10 of us that showed up. And today we have a blizzard that we heard about all week, and look how many of you are here. Like, the church showed up, everyone still came, and they keep you home. So you are becoming more northern every day, and you don't even know it. So driving through all that snow, that's 7 to 10 inches to get here today. Ooh, it's so beautiful out there. Okay. Good thing is it's not about forgiveness today, and since I bought a sled on Wednesday anticipating all the snow and got nothing, and for 4 years we haven't had enough snow to sled. Okay, I'm not happy with the meteorologist, so if you see my Facebook page, you know that. But anyways, here we go. Getting into today, we are continuing our series called Defined. We're into the last 2 weeks of this one, and we are looking at different ways that this world tries to define us versus ways God tries to define us. So in your life, God tries to define you one way, the world tries to define you in a multitude of other different ways. And Christians, a lot of times, get into the habit of believing they have very little control over how they will be defined in this world. But through this series, my hope is that we start to realize and we start to discover we actually have a lot more control over how we'll be defined than we actually thought we do. And the reason for that is because of our relationship with Jesus Christ. Through that relationship, it says in 1 John chapter 4 that we are more than overcomers, that we can overcome the things of this world. But it's a choice that we have to make on a daily basis. Today, we're going to continue to look at the story of Joseph. And what we're going to look at today is his ability to forgive and to see if we will be defined by unforgiveness in our lives or by forgiveness. And it kind of ties in with the Christmas season right now because of what Christ has done for us, and I'll tie that in a little bit at the end. But today, the forgiveness we're talking about is a little bit different than the usual forgiveness we're talking about in church. Today, we're looking at forgiveness for people who have altered kind of the direction of your life. And what I mean by that is this. People have done some really bad stuff to you. Most of us probably have these. Some of you might have lucked out enough in life. You don't have one of these people in your life, but most of us can probably think of 1 or 2 names at minimum that you go, what they did to me really hurt. What they did to me actually altered kind of the steps forward in my life and how things have turned out and stuff like that, and go, those types of things are what we're going to look at today of the forgiveness side of it, is how do you deal with that? Can you find forgiveness? How do you go about that process of forgiveness? And we're going to see that in the life of Joseph. Now, let me tell you what's happened to him from the people who offended him, the people that hurt him. They're the people closest to him. They're his family. So his 11 brothers, actually it's the 10. So it's 10 older brothers. Let me recount the story of what they've done to him. His first 17 years of his life, they basically abused him verbally, mentally, everything else because he is a man of integrity. So his brothers hated him and they basically abused him. What we saw from there is at the age of 19, they start thinking we're going to kill him because we hate him so much, we want him dead. So they actually think about murdering him. But it turns out they just beat him up really bad and they sell him to slave traders that go to Egypt with him. So that's what they do at 19. At 27, Joseph is a slave for 8 years. He actually does pretty good in that situation to the point that he's fairly successful and has quite a bit of responsibility. But at that point, we see he's falsely accused of rape and he is sent to prison. In prison, he has a friend there who swears that he will help him out when he gets out of prison. And the guy gets released and he fails to remember Joseph. And because of that failure, Joseph spends 2 more years in this prison. After those 2 years, what happens is the Pharaoh of Egypt is having dreams. He's having this dream and this dream and this dream, and nobody can interpret what's the dream about. This guy remembers Joseph. Finally, he goes, that guy can actually interpret these dreams. So he finally gets out of prison, and he gets to go interpret these dreams for Pharaoh. And he tells Pharaoh, here's your dreams. What they mean is you're going to have 7 years of plenty, where you're going to have bumper crops. You're going to have everything you can dream of. You're going to be some of the best crop yields you've ever had. Then you're going to have 7 years of famine. So things are going to be horrible for 7 years. Then he kind of lays out a whole organizational process of how he can deal with that, where he can collect all the extra in the 7 years. So in the famine years, then they have food to survive that time. From that point, Pharaoh looks at him and basically goes, you're the wisest guy I've ever met. I'm going to put you in charge of my entire kingdom. And Joseph now is established as the second most powerful man in the kingdom. Only Pharaoh has authority over him. and he now starts to run the process of collecting the food for the first 7 years. During that time, he gets married, he has a couple of kids, and if you remember last time we had the story, it was him naming his children, and his names of his children are basically, thank you God for letting me put my pain in the past, and be able to enjoy the moment that I'm in, and that I can enjoy the things that you're giving me at this point, now that things are turning out fairly decent at this stage in his life, all right? Today, what we're going to do is pick up this story when the 7 years of famine begin. So you have the 7 years of famine, they begin. This is about a 4-chapter period, so I'm going to read some to you. So I apologize for that, but I'm an exceptional reader, and I add so much emotion to it that you're tantalized as I read. So I understand that, so it's not going to be bad for you. I understand that. So here we go. So this is how it starts. In Genesis chapter 41, verses 56 and 57, it just kind of gives you the backdrop of everything for this morning. It says, so the severe famine, after I say that, then I'm messing up right from the beginning. Hold on. Let me do that again. Here we go. So with severe famine everywhere, Joseph opened the storehouses and distributed grain to the Egyptians. For the famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt, and the people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe throughout the world. So we get the backdrop, which is now you're in the bad years. So they've collected it. Everyone kind of knows Egypt has food, so all the surrounding lands start coming to Egypt to go, hey, we got to go buy food so we can survive. Start at chapter 42, it says this. When Jacob heard, now Jacob, you won't remember, most of you won't, this is Joseph's father. So when Jacob heard, so it's Joseph's father who's back home, when Jacob heard that grain was available in Egypt, he said to his sons, why are you standing around looking at one another? I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy enough grain to keep us alive. Otherwise we will die. So Joseph's 10 older brothers went down to Egypt to buy grain. All right, so real quick backdrop on this. Jacob is the father of Joseph. He has 10 older brothers, and he thinks that Joseph is dead because his brother sold him slave traders, sold him his dad that he taken by wild animals. And he has a younger brother named Benjamin, who's his younger brother, who's his biological full brother. He is not going on this journey. It says the 10 older brothers are being sent to Egypt, all right? So the first thing we're going to see with Joseph is this. He's going to recognize he has the potential here to maybe seek some reconciliation and forgiveness in this relationship with his brothers. And so he's going to be made aware, maybe there's a shot here that something could change in the way we communicate in this relationship that we once had, and for forgiveness to maybe play into this picture even though you sold me into slavery 20 years ago. All right? Here's what it says. It says, so Jacob's sons arrived in Egypt along with others to buy food, for the famine was in Canaan as well. This is where his family's from. Since Joseph was governor of all of Egypt and in charge of selling grain to all the people, it was to him that his brothers came. When they arrived, they bowed before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph recognized his brothers instantly, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. For where are you from, he demanded. From the land of Canaan, they replied. We have come to buy food. So from the very start, they come before him. He has his 10 brothers. Joseph recognizes them. They have no clue who he is. 20 years ago, he was a kid. He's a 19-year-old. They sold him off. He looks like an Egyptian now. He's in the second seat of power in the world. You would never imagine that's where our brother is. They probably think he's already dead. You probably don't think a whole lot about him other than what they did to him. But Joseph at this point very easily could have said, hey, send them off somewhere else and have to deal with someone else. But Joseph decides, I'm going to deal with them personally, and I'm going to hold this case before me, and I'm going to interact with them. So he sees an opportunity, and he takes the first step in going, I'm going to see how this thing plays out. Here's what goes on. It says this. The second part. The main part of the text now goes to this. Joseph needs to see if they've changed. Sees an opportunity. Are my brothers the same guys they were 20 years ago, or have they changed? And that's what the next part of the text is going to set up. It's a decent chunk of it, but I'm going to just kind of paraphrase a lot of it for you. Here's what it says in verses 9 through 12. It says, he said to them, you are spies. You have come to see how vulnerable our land has become. No, my lord, they exclaimed. Your servants have simply come to buy food. We are all brothers, members of the same family. We are honest men, sir. We are not spies. Yes, you are, Joseph insisted. You have come to see how vulnerable our land has become. So Joseph is kind of playing a game with them. They don't know who he is. He knows who they are. And he's going to go, have they changed? Can I see if they changed? They're the same guys. Here's what happens in verses 14 through 20. What you see is Joseph kind of agrees with them, and he says, here's what we're going to do is I'm going to take your brother Simon. He's going to stay here. I'm going to give you the grain you need for the family to survive, but I'm going to keep Simon here with me. You're going to go back. You're going to go get this brother. You say you have Benjamin. You say you have another brother at home. He's a younger brother. You're going to go get him, and you're going to bring him back. And if you bring him back and I see Benjamin, I'll let Simon go home, and I'll go home with you. And so what you have Joseph doing is, in Joseph's mind, he's going, if they're the same guys, there's a good likelihood Benjamin's been killed too. Or they sold him off in a slave trade. And so they're just telling me there's a younger brother, but there's not really a younger brother. These guys are still liars, and they did the same thing to my brother they did to me. So he's trying to test them out now, going, okay, you're leaving one behind, you bring Benjamin back, I'll release them to you, and they can both go home. And so he sends them off with their grain in verses 14 through 20, but keeps Simon in prison and sticks him in prison while they're gone. Then we see this. In the midst of their conversation, it's interesting, and I want to point this one scripture out to you. You get a glimpse of the pain these guys have had, or kind of like a foreshadowing of the regret they have of what they did to Joseph. Here's the verse. It says in verse 21, it says this, speaking among themselves, so this is when Joseph is telling them, here's what I'm going to do for you. It says, speaking amongst themselves, they said, clearly we are being punished because of what we did to Joseph long ago. Listen to the words here. We saw his anguish when he pleaded for his life, but we wouldn't listen. That's why we're in this trouble. So you can see somewhere along in this 20 years, these brothers have had conversations and they've had times where they've rethought what they did to Joseph. And they're going, we saw the anguish in his face when he was begging us not to kill him, when he was begging us not to sell him away. We remember that day, and it seems like it's been something that's tormented them. But they can still remember, you can imagine what this would be like. They can still see what his face looked like when they were selling him off to the slave traders and go and take him and put him in the back of the little box or whatever they had where they took him to Egypt. And so you can tell this is something I think that probably has pained them, that they've remembered every day since they did it. And that's what we see in verse 21. It then goes on with this. They return home, and they find their father, and this is in verses 22 through 38. They go home, find their dad, and they basically tell their dad how harshly they were dealt with and how this Egyptian guy was really mean towards them. And he kept Simon behind, and he said, we have to bring Benjamin back, and stuff like that. And basically what their dad says to him is, there's no way. Simon stays, Simon can rot there, but I'm not sending Benjamin back because I will not lose Benjamin, because he's the only son I have from his wife. That's the only son I have from her, and there's no way. I've already lost Joseph. I'm not going to lose Benjamin, and I don't trust you guys to take him to Egypt and not to lose him because you just lost Simon. And he goes, there's no way I'm sending him back, so Simon, tough luck, he's staying behind. In chapter 43, verses 1 through 15, what we find at the beginning of this chapter, their family now is starving, so they're on the verge of starvation because Jacob refuses to let them go back to Egypt with Benjamin, so they can't go get more grain, so they are now starving as a family. And it's at this point Jacob finally relents and finally gives in because he recognizes my whole family is going to die. So Benjamin's going to die one way or the other, so I might as well take the risk and roll the dice, and I'll send Benjamin back with him. So he says you can take Benjamin back, and the 10 older brothers take off with Benjamin, and they head back. Benjamin at this time, you can safely assume is probably in his early 20s, okay? But they still call him like their kid brother or little brother and stuff like that, all right? So they take Benjamin back to Egypt. In verses 16 through 34, what happens? They arrive in Egypt. Benjamin is there with them. Joseph sees them, and Joseph says, hey, tell them to come to my palace. We're going to have a meal. We're going to set this thing up. They're going to come over and have a meal. So in verses 1 through 13, or no, 16 through 34, they come to his palace. They have some small talk. They still have no clue who he is, why they're eating at this guy's palace. They think they're in trouble. They don't know what the deal is, but he has a meal with them. He feeds them well. Then he tells them, hey, here's the deal. I'm going to send you guys home, all the grain with you and all that stuff, and you can take off. It's all outside. Your stuff's loaded up. Head on out. So the brothers leave that meal. They hop on their horses or their camels or whatever they got. They start heading back home. What had happened is Joseph had actually told his guys, in each of their sacks with the grain, hide money in it so that we can accuse them of stealing from me. So he hides all their money back in their sacks. He takes his personal cup, silver cup, and he puts it in Benjamin's sack and basically sets them up, and he sends them out of the city. And as they get out of the city, he sends his personal guard out, and says, go get those guys, they stole from me, and go to them and reveal they stole from me. So they go, they get the 10 brothers outside the city, they arrest them. The brothers say, we've done nothing wrong, and they say, go through our stuff, and they're like, okay, we're going to go through our stuff. And the brothers say, if you can find anything that we've taken from you, that brother, you can go back, you can kill him, you can slave him, you can do whatever you want. We didn't do anything, we're people of integrity. So they go through their stuff, dump it out, and then all of a sudden they see the golden covenant, they see the money, the brothers start to freak out, they see that it's silver cups in Benjamin's bag, and they go, we need to go back and talk to this Jacob guy. So they request, can we go back and talk to Joseph? Can we go back and talk to him? And they're like, well, you're being arrested at this point. Yeah, you go back. So now they go back, they stand before Joseph. As they stand before Joseph, this is in 1 through 13 again, and then going into 14 through 17 in chapter 44. Basically what Joseph says to him is, here's the deal. Benjamin, you stole from me, that guy's becoming my slave. The rest of you can go home. He's staying here with me, he becomes my slave. The rest of you are free to go. At this point, the brothers go, we can't do that. We cannot return home without Benjamin. And he says, no, you're going to return home without Benjamin. They all say, here's what we'll do. We'll all become your slaves. 10 of us, just let Benjamin go home. Just send him home with the grain. We will all become your slaves. You can do whatever you want with us, but don't keep him here, because our father will die of heartbreak. It will kill our father, and we cannot see that anguish on his face. So leave us here, let him go home. And Joseph insists with them. Joseph says, no, I don't want any of you. I just want Joseph. He's the one, I want Benjamin. Benjamin's the one that's staying here. And so this is the last part of this account we see in verses 33 to 34. This is Judah who speaks. Now Judah, again, you probably don't remember all these names, but Judah, when they first think about murdering him and killing him, Judah's the brother that convinces them to stick him in a well, and then his plan was to come back and rescue him later that night and get him out of the well and rescue him. In the meantime, they see the traveling caravan, and they sell him when Judah's gone off to eat lunch or something, and they sell him as a slave, and Judah comes back and goes, what have you done? So at this point, it's that same brother, Judah steps up and he says this, so please, my Lord, let me stay here as a slave instead of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. For how can I return to my father if the boy is not with me? I couldn't bear to see the anguish this would cause my father. So Judah just breaks down and goes, Joseph, or this Egyptian guy, the Egyptian ruler, I can't let him not go home. He has to go home. I swore to my father I would get him home. So keep me, kill me, do whatever you have to do, enslave me. Please, for whatever you do, let him go home, because I can't picture my dad's face. You see this guy in anguish, which then gets into the last part of this whole story we're going to spend some time here on, which is this. Joseph now has the opportunity to forgive. Okay, Joseph is going to get into a situation here where he has the opportunity to forgive people who have done horrible things to him, that have altered his life, and he's going to be presented with guys that have changed and now go, will I forgive them, or will I ignore them and live my unforgiveness and just keep moving on? And Joseph's choice is going to be, I'm going to forgive them. And the reason he does, just understand here, he does because he can see a change in them. They are not the same people. If they were the same people, I think Joseph probably would have just enslaved them and left them as slaves. But because he can see a heart change in these guys, they're not the same guys that used to be. Benjamin is still alive. He can tell they have remorse over what they did to him. Because one of the funny things in the story when you read it, they don't understand an Egyptian can speak their language. So they talk in front of Jacob all the time in their native tongue. Or in front of, not Jacob, Joseph in their native tongue. And Joseph understands everything they're saying, and they don't know he understands what they're saying. So he can see their hearts. He can see that they feel horrible for what they've done and they have changed their lives. And it's at that point that Joseph decides, I'm going to forgive them. So let me walk you through the process he does in this act of forgiveness. Because here's the thing. Forgiveness in these situations are life-changing. Not just for the one giving forgiveness, but for the ones being forgiven. They're life-changing events. If you've ever been in one of these processes where you've had to forgive someone that's really wronged you, that's really hurt you deep, the forgiveness and what happens in that moment is incredible for both people in the party. And you're going to see that with Joseph, and I think it gives us a good roadmap of how to handle this type of forgiveness. So here's the first thing you're going to see in this process. The first thing you're going to see is Joseph releases his pain. Even though we talked about Joseph names his sons, thanks God for, well, let me put my pain in the past. The thing is, when those brothers show back up, the raw emotions are all still there. And so there's several times leading up to this point in the story, he has to remove himself from the situation because he starts crying, and he has to go compose himself. and then bring himself back before them. So at this point, what you're going to see is you see the 20 years of torment that's still somewhere deep inside him, that he has put away, that he's buried, that God's allowed him to release to some degree. It's been put back in the forefront of his life, and he releases that pain. Here's what it says in verses 1 through 2. It says this: Joseph could stand it no longer. So this is when Judah comes out and begs him. It says, Joseph could stand it no longer. There were so many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, "Out, all of you." So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. So you can just picture this, the emotions of 20 years of this guy just coming out. To the point that he's weeping so bitterly and so loudly that the people outside the chambers now can hear him, to the point that there's someone concerned and going, "Hey, go tell Pharaoh something's wrong. Something's wrong." And so word gets to Pharaoh, something's wrong with Joseph. Something's going on because he's crying so intently. And if you've ever been in one of these situations, let me tell you why he's crying so intently. When you have that much pain that you've held on to, or you found a way to bury it or put it there, when you can finally release it, it's an emotional point. It's a very emotional day, an emotional moment. And that's what we see with Jacob is 20 years of pain. For the first time, he's letting it go and letting it get out. Which leads to the second thing, and this is key in these situations, is he articulates the offense that was done to him. Okay? He doesn't just kind of treat it with kid gloves and be like, "Well, we're not going to really talk about that," or "I'm just crying out, you're forgiven, everything's good," or whatever. He articulates what it is that he's releasing and what it is that went on. Here's what it says in verses 3 and 4. It says, "I am Joseph," he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. Now, just real quick, can you imagine their emotions? 20 years ago, we sold this kid to these slave traders, and he's the guy now that is in charge of all the food, and he's the second most powerful guy in the world. There's no way they could have ever dreamed this. Their minds have to be blown, and they are speechless. We don't even know what to say at this point. He says, "Please come closer," he said to them. So they came closer, and he said again, "I am Joseph, your brother. Remember whom you sold into slavery in Egypt." Okay? He articulates what it is you did to me. That I haven't forgotten it. I know exactly who you are. I know what you did to me. It's not like that's all gone. You're the people who sold me into slavery and put me in 20 years of torment going through the life I've been through for all these years. You're the people who did it to me, and I understand who you are. I'm not mistaken. I remember that event like it was yesterday. And I know you guys do too. So we're going to clear the map here and go, that's what it's about. Now let me tell you why this is important. These types of situations, a lot of times in our relationship where people hurt us deep. A lot of times you see them in spousal relationships. A lot of times you see them with parent and kid relationships, sibling relationships, people that were like family to you relationships where people did things that you never thought they could do. People are maybe in role model situations with you that blew something up or whatever. And so what you see here is this ability to go, this is what I'm going to forgive you for. This is where the pain stems from. This is what was done. So we're both on the same page here. So when we know this forgiveness is given, you know what you're being forgiven for, and I've stated what it's for, so we can move on from this moment. A lot of times we treat this part with kid gloves, and it's not helping the forgiveness process. We don't like to bring up the past. We don't like, let's get around that. Being a person who receives the forgiveness, a lot of times we have this tendency. Well, you don't need to remind me what we did. Let's just get on to the forgiveness. Okay? I want you to understand this is a key part of the forgiveness process. Articulating what it was that was done at that moment. And that leads to the third thing, which is this. Joseph next releases them from their guilt. Okay, this is another huge one. Joseph's forgiveness is this: hey guys, you're released. It's not on you anymore. I forgive you. Here's what he says in verse 45, verse 5, the first part of verse 5, because we're going to use the second part next week. But it says this. He says, "But don't be upset." So he just says, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt." He says, "But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place." So Joseph goes, "Hey guys, I'm releasing you from your guilt. Let it go. You did it, yeah, but you know what? Don't feel guilty anymore. And that's a key thing from us to say if we are the one giving forgiveness, is you have to let the other person know, I'm not going to hold this over your head anymore. I'm not going to use this against you anymore. I'm not going to look at this anymore. I'm going to release you from your guilt, and it's going to be water on the bridge, and it's over with. And we're going to move on from this moment forward. So he, at that point, says, let your guilt go. Let it be released. Which gets to the last part, which is this. After that, and this is where a lot of people struggle too with forgiveness, is he lets the healing begin. And he lets reconciliation start within this relationship. Here's how it reads, verses 13 through 15. Joseph says, go tell my father of my honored position here in Egypt. Describe for him everything you have seen, and then bring my father here quickly. Weeping with joy, he embraced Benjamin, and Benjamin did the same. This is the key. Then Joseph kissed each of his brothers and wept over them. And after that, they began talking freely with him. So the last thing he does is he goes over to him and says, let's restart this relationship. At first he goes to Benjamin, who never did anything to him. He's a young kid. Embraces him. Benjamin's like, he's my brother, and they embrace. But then he goes to the 10 who offended him, who hurt him, who destroyed his life in a lot of ways. Went to the 10 and individually each one embraced. And it says wept over them. And then it says at that point they started talking freely. Obviously he gave a forgiveness where they went, we don't have to feel the guilt anymore. This stuff's gone. Joseph, how are you? And our relationship is restored. You can just imagine if you put yourself in this situation, the emotions of everybody involved and the healing that starts to begin at that point, and the relationships that start to build once again. As you read further, which we won't get into in a lot of this, but if you read further out, basically they move all their families and everyone back to Egypt to be there with Joseph, and they build relationships again, their family once again. And so what you see is you see biblical forgiveness. You see a true forgiveness of putting the water under the bridge, putting it behind and going, nobody's guilty anymore. This isn't going to be brought up anymore. I've seen you have changed. I've given you forgiveness, and we're going to rebuild our relationship, and we're going to move into the future together. And Joseph had a choice to either have that be the result of the situation or to be defined with unforgiveness to go, no, they don't deserve it. And Joseph chose to forgive, which is an amazing act. Now, the reason this is all very important for us is one, personally in our own relationships, but number two, I want you to understand how closely this forgiveness parallels our forgiveness with Jesus and what God has done for us. Think about it. God created us to be in a close relationship with Him, to trust Him, to be faithful to Him, to be the people He created us to be, to do the things He called us to do, and we broke that relationship with Him. We offended Him. We traded on Him. We broke all that with Him and said we will do our own thing, and we hurt Him deeply. But yet God does what? He sees an opportunity to redeem us. And what does He do? He sends a little baby, who is He Himself. He is all God, and He's all us. And He sends a little baby to us and says, I'm going to let him live here for 33 some odd years. And I'm going to let him grow up and live a life perfectly so he can eventually someday be sacrificed for the things you've done wrong. Okay? God doesn't beat around with what we've done wrong. He doesn't code it. He doesn't make it something that's hard for us to find. He's very blunt with us and says, here's what you've done wrong. Here's what, how you walked away from me. He names the sins out for us in the Scripture, so we're all aware of what we've done. But then He does what we see here is He releases us from our guilt by giving His Son as a sacrifice for us and says, but I'm not going to hold it against you anymore, and those sins are no longer going to be your sins, they're going to be His sins, and you're free from them, and they're not going to be an issue in our relationship anymore. And I'm going to treat you as if you are family. And we're going to build this new relationship, and I'm going to repair you, and I'm going to build you, and I'm going to make you into something better than you ever thought you could be, walking with me. And so the same forgiveness you see in Joseph is the same forgiveness you see in Jesus Christ towards us that we start to celebrate this time of Christmas. And thank God, God is not defined by unforgiveness, but He's defined by what? Forgiveness and the grace of God. And we are called to be the same to the world around